everybody. My name is Piotr. Welcome to another episode of the Sitrep podcast dedicated to Team Yankee. Today I'm joined by my longtime friend Arek. How are you, Arek, today?
I'm fine, thank you, Piotr.
So, it's quite hot over here because we are reaching almost 40 degrees Celsius, but that did not stop us from meeting and talking about missions in Team Yankee, because we were spoiling this topic for some time now in our past episodes, and today we decided to take a look at the missions in Team Yankee, because it's the soul of the game for us, basically, because you have all the mechanics, your arm list, but you have to play some kind of missions, and there are two types of missions basically that you can play, maybe three. First of all, you have some pre-planned missions that are available in the army books. These are pre-designed by Battlefront, and you have some units that you need to have in your army list, and the objectives are set up already, and you have some, for example, terrain set up or some guidance how to do this. And you can also play whatever scenario you design in your own head with your friend, for example. And you can also play some generic missions that are available in the missions pack. That is a free downloadable PDF that is available on the Team Yankee Battlefront site. So there are some missions in this little booklet, and Arek, there are I believe 22 missions over there. Correct. And can you give us some idea how this looks from the point of view when it comes to the information that are provided for each mission?
Mm-hmm. So Team Yankee is a point-based game where two forces of the same point value clash in the missions. The missions show the dynamic between the forces, which is just not putting everything on the table and shoot out to kill the other guy, but it's more to it. In the 22 missions, they display where the deployment zones of both sides are, how many objectives and who puts them where, and what are the special rules to get advantage on the other side or to balance the advantages on both sides. So this is mainly it. How you win that mission. This is a topic which we have to start with. You have two options. First is to breaking the opponent formation force. To break an opponent force, you have to kill most of his platoons. If a force has only one platoon left, it's automatically broken on the start of its next turn. And if you run out of forces, allied forces do not count, so they are dead weight then you're losing the game automatically. The second part is, if you don't kill your opponent as quickly, then you go for the objectives. The missions design show where you can put the objectives, and to take objectives, to win it, you have to start a turn in 4 inches of the objective with a tank or infantry team or a passenger in a transport, and end the turn without any opponent teams in 4 inches.
Okay.
And this is mainly it.
So you cannot take an objective with your aircraft units or, for example, your empty transport units. So APCs do not count. Also, independent teams do not count when it comes to taking the objectives.
And also damaged vehicles. If you shake the crew, like bail it, so they leave they leave the vehicle, they also cannot take any ground, so they do not count.
Yeah, that's also important. So, when it comes to Poland, at least, we have said it not once but twice or maybe even more times, we play lower points than in the, for example, US. So we play like 75 to 65 points, or 65 to 75 points, I should say, which makes you think more about the type of units you are going to include in your list. And list building is also important when choosing the mission that you are going to play. Anyway, when we are at a tournament, you choose a stance. So you have 3 stances in the game. You have the attack stance, the defense stance, and the maneuver stance. So both of you, so you and your opponent, simultaneously reveal, after checking your lists and how the table is set up, what are you going to play. So, for example, you can choose attack to attack, you can choose attack to defend, defend to maneuver, maneuver to attack, and etc. etc. There's a matrix, and when you have chosen your stance, you will roll a die in order to see which mission you are going to play. Sometimes the tournament organizer will pre-plan it. So, for example, no matter which type of stance both of you will choose, you will play mission number 3 from the crisscross between on the matrix. So, for example, when you will choose for example, maneuver and defend, the tournament organizer will say that you will play mission number 3, which will be for this crisscross probe. So this is how we work it out over here. There are also some limitations at some tournaments that, for example, you can only choose each stance twice. So you have a 4 or 5 round tournament and you can decide to attack 2 times, defend 2 times, or maneuver 2 times. And why this is important, Arek?
This is very important because some lists can work in any type of scenario, but some are very bad at, for example, defending. We will get to this when we will discuss the special rules of the missions, which are very important. And for example, tank forces are really bad at defending because one of the rules disallow you to have most of your force on the table. Details later. And this is also very important because the lists, if they are not designed to work on every mission, they are more or less disadvantaged in some of the missions. And when you design a list, you have to already think what you will do in certain type of missions. And the thing is, on our tournaments, if you have a 5-day tournament, 5-round tournament, you will at least once have to play one of the stances you wouldn't like to, and you have this. It gives you a deeper strategical value in the missions. So you have to plan where you can risk to play at a disadvantage against a list. So I think this is all I can tell.
Yeah, so for example, if you decide to build a really heavy tank list that is constructed mainly of tanks, it might be really hard for you to choose a defense stance and actually defend with this list. That is why you have to take this into consideration, and this is also why combined forces lists are really nice, because they will at least have a fair chance to fight in each of the 3 stances. But as I have said before you choose the stance, you check the opponent's list. So for example, if you see he has a lot of tanks, you might think, okay, he's going to attack, but he might surprise you, and Arek might tell you something about that, because as he says, he knows what he would do, but sometimes his opponents surprise him and he has a tough day.
Yeah, I had a story on the Warsaw tournament where I was facing British infantry horde with a lot of Milans, etc. And normally the everyday basis for such lists is to defend. So you have to come to them, they shoot you through with all the Milans, and you die during the process. And one of the ways to avoid this is to force a scenario, fair fight scenario. This is a scenario where we both have the same rules on the table and both have objectives to defend, and there's no special rules for the defender. There's no defender player. They both got on the same stance. So by doing this, not only I disallow him to play a mission which is the narrower, where what you play the sideways from the short table sides, and I also disallow him to have ambush and to just wait and shoot me to death.
Yeah.
But my opponent once in this tournament chose attack against my list, and I was screwed because I had a lot of tanks in small platoons. And why this is a problem, or you will hear about this when we will talk about deep reserves.
Oh yeah, and actually reserves are the topic that we are going to talk about next, because there are some special rules that are given for each and every mission, and this include reserves, and there are some types, different types of reserves. We are going to talk about it in a minute. There is an ambush that is usually available to the defender. There are some minefields that you can place if you are defending, and also the time of the day that you can choose in each and every Team Yankee mission. So you either can play during daylight, or you can choose, for example, dusk or dawn. If you have, for example, some thermal imagining, it will be easier for you to play during the night, for example, to attack, especially when the defender doesn't have thermal imagining. But we will talk about it later. Now, when it comes to the reserves, so you have reserves, which are the immediate reserves. You have some deep reserves, you have scattered reserves, and you have also delayed reserves. And why reserves are important? Because, for example, if you, as I have said, are playing a game of 75 points, you have to build a list in such a way that when you start the game and you have 60% of your force on the table, that means that you will have only 45 points on the table from the beginning of the game, and the rest will be in reserves. So during a tournament, for example, you have to know what you are going to put in reserve against a given opponent. So, for example, when I build my French force lists, I usually put all my helicopters and some tanks in reserve, because they add up, and this gives me equally 30 points, which I know will come and try to save the day. But as I said, there are different types of reserves. And Arek, can you tell us how these types of reserves differ between each other, and why it is important to choose your reserves wisely?
So first, there are two types of reserves, and this is about their timing. So first is normal reserves. It works like this, that the forces which you have to hold in reserves, and the scenario tell you how much and who has to do it, will start rolling from the first turn on any roll of 5. You roll with one die. If you roll a 5 up, it's a successful reserve, and then you can put one of the platoons on the table. You have to specify where it comes from, and it can join the fight. Every next turn you add another dice, and it accumulates. So in the second turn you roll 2 die, third turn 3 die, etc.
Do you have to choose what are you putting on the table before you roll, or do you choose it after the roll?
It's after the roll. After the roll you have to choose what you will bring on the table. If it's aircraft, then you have to roll if it will come, but then it tries to come every turn, because aircrafts are a bit random in this game. And another thing is, after you roll 3 or more dice, even if you don't roll any 5 up, then you still get one reserve automatically. So it's a safe thing, because before this rule came to being, there were missions where if you roll crappy, you didn't get any of your reserves through the whole game, and you were so screwed that it was really, really too tough for the balance thing.
Yeah, so it was a problem of balance, and this thing that you choose what will come on the table is really important when it comes to scattered and deep reserves, in my opinion, or the delayed reserves. Because, for example, if you have a unit that when it comes to the battlefield it cannot shoot, you can have a problem, because you need some immediate support, and you, for example, end up with a hot gazelle flight which cannot shoot when it comes from the reserves. So you, for example, must choose something else that will be able to immediately save your, for example, flank from totally collapsing. So we have the immediate reserves covered. What can you tell us, Arek, about the delayed reserves?
So delayed reserves work the same. The problem is for the defender that you start rolling only from turn 3 up. So it's longer when you play without your support. Just to balance these things, most scenarios when you have delayed reserves, Also, the attacker has normal reserves, so he doesn't start with the full force, or you have the advantage of the different kind, like your deployment is bigger, you have more minefields, or etc.
Yeah. And deep reserves.
And deep reserves are the clue why the heavy tank lists don't like to defend. It means that when you are defending, all your heavy equipment apart from one platoon, and this includes aircraft, have to be held in reserves. So if you have a full tank force, and this is specified by the period when you play Team Yankee's Front Armor 4, I think. Front Armor 4, then every tank with Front Armor 4, which includes APCs like, for example, Warriors or Bradleys. And Bradleys, or BMP3s, they cannot be on the table apart from one platoon. So if you have a really heavy tank list, you might end with one platoon on the table from the start and everything else in reserve.
Yeah, this can be a problem. What can also be a problem is the scattered reserves, because scattered reserves work like this. So when you finally get your reserves, so you roll a 5+, then you have to roll one more time in order to see from which part of the table they will come. So for example, they can come from the left part of the table, they can come from the center, or for example the right side of the table. And this can also screw you up, because you want and need these reserves, for example, in the center, where your center is collapsing, or for example he's taking your objective, and suddenly your reserves decide to come, the dice gods decide that they will come from the right flank, and you will be not able to contest the objective or destroy the enemy because some terrain will be blocking you or something like that. So this also needs to be taken in consideration. A great option for reserves might seem to be some helicopters, because they just roll onto the table and they show up anywhere, despite the fact that they are scattered. So it doesn't matter for
them. They have unlimited movement, and for example, for hints, they can shoot when they move. So they are a perfect reserve, because they are useful the turn they come from reserves.
And it's quite interesting to design a helicopter that cannot hover in one place in order to shoot, and it has to, fly in order to actually use its weapons. I believe they upgraded it later by adding a stronger engine, so it doesn't matter. But when it comes to the period we are talking about, it's actually quite interesting. So we have some reserves. They are described in a given scenario. When they will come, how they work, and how many points you have to keep in reserves. Usually it's 60% on the table and 40% in reserves. Now, we also have a special rule for ambushes. And this means that one of the platoons that you choose while defending is going to show up as an ambush on your part of the table. You cannot have an ambush in the attacker's deployment zone, because this would allow you, for example, to kill his artillery, or destroy anti-aircraft support or whatever. So this ambush shows up on the table in a place chosen by the defender in his deployment zone, I believe. And Arek, are there some special rules that we need to cover while talking about ambushes?
Okay, so ambush rule is something to show that the defender is waiting for the opponent to perfect time to strike with maximal efficiency. So what does it do? It's that you can get one of your platoons, which is the firepower you need, to be unhindered by any suppression, to show up when you need it, and to fire with his full potential, sometimes even in the flank. There are some limitations where you can place the unit. It has to be on your, as Piotr already told, on your deployment zone. The spearhead doesn't extend it, if you would ask in some missions.
Or cheating.
or you are cheating. And this allows you to hit the advancing attacker's force hard, and sometimes snipe something which he doesn't want to lose. And when you deploy, You have to deploy more than 16 inches from any teams of the opponent unless you're out of line of sight, or if you are concealed in 4 inches. So this means you can start very close, shoot with all your weapons, and then disengage by order, or you can go for the flanks. Immediately go for the flanks. For example, place a Leopard 1 platoon, go there 10 inches, get on the flanks and destroy half of the opponent's tank platoon, slowing him down and making a lot of problems.
Yeah, so basically your forces that are the platoon that is in ambush, it has a full rate of fire. It's not counted as, for example, moved like the reserve, because the reserve enters the battlefield and it has to move with tactical speed or something like that.
It can dash.
It can dash, but when it moves, for example, in tactical speed, so when it enters the battlefield as a reserve and it has after movement a rate of fire lower than while it's standing, you will have to use the lower value. And with ambush, you can place, for example, a platoon of Milans somewhere on the table. The opponent doesn't know where, so they show up where they are needed, and they can kill a lot of things at one go if you, of course, roll well. So the ambush tries to simulate something like a pre-planned covered defensive position that the enemy doesn't know about, and he really has to carefully move around the table because, for example, if you would put a platoon of Milans at a given place, he would know to avoid it with his tanks, for example, and this allows you to surprise him a little bit, as the ambush by its name suggests. So there are also two things that we would all like to talk about. These are mines and the time of the day at which we are fighting. So you have mines. When you are defending, usually there is a rule within a mission that for each 25 points of your army list, you are available to put one mine marker. This doesn't mean that you have one mine on the table. It means that you can have, for example, when you are playing 75 points, you can have up to 3 minefields on the table. And the range of the minefield is 2 inches from the marker. And when an enemy unit tries to cross through a minefield,
or friendly also,
or friendly unit, because why not, it must take a hit.
Skill test.
A skill test, yeah, a skill test. And if you fail the skill test, you have to take a hit. It's firepower of 5 and anti-tank 5 and the firepower of +1.
1+.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a tank, you take damage on your top armor, and you cannot be, die, bailed. Anyway, you have to stop if you fail the skill test. So this can hinder your advance. There are some other rules that count towards minefields, I believe. You can clear them.
Yeah, first it sounds awkward that the tanks is hit on the top, but there's no bottom armor stat in Team Yankee, so it's a simplification that the top is one of the lower armors, and the highest armor you can get is 2. So on 1-2, every type of the tank will be destroyed automatically.
Okay. This game is unrealistic. Stop. It's crap. Let's not talk about it anymore. Mines and top armor. Come on.
Yeah, and to clear mines, you have to either enter it with infantry and get a special order on the next turn if you are unpinned to just clear them, or you have to get some mine plows. For example, the Warsaw Pact tanks can buy an upgrade in the list, so they can also clear mines like infantry.
Yep. And that's about it when it comes to the mines. They are useful, but the problem with them is that the enemy knows exactly where they are, because it's not any kind of, a hidden marker or any type of such thing. He knows, but this allows you to control the board more. So
it's an area denial tool.
Yeah, it's an area denial tool. So, for example, if he wants to push through somewhere, he has to either ride past it or, for example, try to cross through a forest. And while trying to cross through a forest, he might get stuck, which delays his advance. So this about the mines. And also, each and every mission you can play during daylight, but you can also choose to play during dusk or play during dawn. And how it works, Arek? You roll a die. If you are successful, you can play during dawn or you can play during dusk.
It's also different in different missions. If you are the attacker, mostly if you are the attacker, but there are missions if you are the defender, you choose. If you want to try to fight at night. When in each mission you have a table which shows you what you have to roll to get a night fighting scenario. You have 3 types, so it's a daylight, dusk, or dawn. Daylight is you play the whole game at the daylight, so it doesn't allow any special rules. And during dusk and dawn, one of them starts at night, and after roll 3 of the defender, you roll on a 5 up. And if you roll, either the night starts or the dawn starts, and you start to fight in daylight. And every round you don't roll, you add a die, so it's more likely to either break the night, or so that day breaks, or that the night falls. So what are the rules comparing? What does it bring when you fight at night time? So first of all, you cannot go as fast as daylight, because you can go only as fast as your terrain dash.
Yep.
And you also have +1 to cross. So if you try to get any heavy terrain, through any heavy terrain, it's harder. And it can also hinder you in assaults, because then you can also cross the terrain. It can use to add advantage of an infantry force. Infantry force doesn't care. They go through everything without any tasks. And the second thing is the night fighting visibility table. So you cannot see through the whole table when you shoot with your teams. If the opponent didn't shoot the turn before, in which case the flashes gives their position, then you have to roll on the night visibility table by rolling a d6.
You roll on the night visibility table basically, and the number that you roll decides the range of your shooting. So this is quite important, because, for example, when you are a cheating American and you have thermal imagining, it helps you a lot. But it means that when something does not shoot at you, you have to roll if you have range to it. If something that did shoot the previous turn, it doesn't count, because there are some muzzle flashes, you can see where the shots came from, and etc. You don't have to make this roll. And this can be tricky, can also be an advantage, for example, for the attacker, because the defender, if he doesn't have thermal or even some laser rangefighters, it can be harder for him to hit you while you slowly advance towards his position, and you wait, for example, for daylight to start and then slaughter him outright. However, darkness can also be your enemy, especially if you don't have thermal imagining. It can be a problem. So depending on who you are playing with and the type of equipment your forces has, it can be either night can be either good for you or bad. So you have to choose wisely. If you do not decide to choose the time of the day, you will play during daylight.
Yeah, and also apart from the visibility table, how long you see, there's also a +1 to hit, unless you have thermal imagining with all of your weapons. And the maximum range you can get is 24 inches, because you roll a d6, and it's 0.4. So yeah. If you get a 6, you get 24 inches max. So it's also not the ranges of the guns, like it's 40 inches. So you also decreased at the same time. And also artillery is harder to range in, but it doesn't have to roll on this 24 inches range. It's see through a whole table, but the ranging is +1.
Yeah. So this is basically all we wanted to cover in today's episode. We will come back to the missions. I try to discuss each and every mission and how it works and what are the advantages, which lists to take. If you want to ask any questions, please leave them in the comments. We will try to answer. If you have some arm lists you want to show us, you can also post them. We will try to cover it in the next episode and try to help you which stance, for example, to choose for your games. And for now, thanks everybody. Bye bye, and hopefully hear you next time.
Yeah, bye everybody.